Hello, it's Christy from Cottage Grove Quilt Company, that crazy quilt lady's back with today a tutorial on how to make your own backing. That's right, we're going to talk about creating your own backing for your quilt. Recently, I completed a sample of a quilt that we're using here in the store for an upcoming Block of the Month program. And with that sample, I had a lot of extra fabric. I was really surprised at the quantity of fabric that I had left over. So I thought, well, this quilt's only 80 by 80 and all this extra fabric, I'd hate to just store it away for no future use in that mystery pile that we never know what we're going to do with. So I decided I was going to use that fabric today and create my back. So let me show you the progress and talk to you a little bit about how to make your own back. So we're in my sewing room and we've gotten started on our backing. And so what I've done is, you can see I have some large pieces of fabric, and then I also have some smaller pieces of fabric. And what I do when I do this is I just piece it together, just kind of hodgepodge. And you may wonder, well, Christy, how do you come up with these measurements and the how-to and how to do all this? So let me talk to you about it. Basically, I just grab big pieces out of my leftover pieces of fabric and I just start stitching them together. I don't really do any rhyme or reason. Now, when I have a small grouping like this group right here, I just stitch it together like I would if I was working on a unit of a quilt. And you can see down here on the bottom, I have that again. Okay, and then what I do is I just start stitching them together. Right, like this. Just put them together and then I piece them to the bigger piece over here. And then before I add it to the next group, I make sure it's square. So that is very important. You have to make sure when you add these pieces together that this piece here is square, this piece is square, this one is square, and then you put them all together. And you may wonder, well, now Christy, how do I do that? Well, let's take a walk over to the cutting table and I will show you how. So we're at the cutting table and we've taken our large piece of fabric, we've given it a little starch and pressed it really well to get all the wrinkles out. If you're like me, when you've done your project, it all goes in a bin or a box or something, and you need to press your fabric to get all the wrinkles out that you've managed to put into your fabric while it's been sitting there waiting to get your project done. And then once I have it pressed really good, I'm at the cutting table and now we're gonna lay it out and how we square it up. Okay, so at our cutting table, we have our large piece of fabric, and what I have done is I have put it together edge to edge along the selvage. And you can see right along here, I have a gap. See how that doesn't line up at all? And then the same thing over here, it's got a crooked part up at the top and then it's all the way down, a little jaggedy. So this is where the only time on my cutting table I actually use the lines on the mat, and all I'm using it for is just an edge for my fold. Okay, that's all I use it for. And then what I will do is I come along and you can see when I've got it on the fold, it's pretty square right here, fairly much, you know. It's right on that 45 degrees, so I know that's pretty square, but look what happens as I follow it up. Oh, look. By the time we're up to a top, we're at least 1/4 of an inch off. So now I got to square that off and make it the exact size all the way around. So let's get the ruler and cut and trim it off. Now, because of cameras and that kind of thing, I've had to actually do a double fold here, which is fine. It's the same principle. So I've got it lined up. I'm going to come over and just do this right edge first. And we're going to line this up again across this bottom line and come up and over. And what I'm looking for is I'm actually using this blue line on my mat right up here, and I'm putting that right on my 1/4 inch on my ruler. I'm going to just take that and trim. And you can see when I do that, look at the variation along here. Look at the variation all the way down to see how thin that is, how thick that is. If I would have put that in my back, it would have made a very wonky back. Now we're just going to rotate this and do the other side the same way. And I'm just going to make sure that I have it all trimmed nice and pretty. And again, I'm just using the lines on the mat just to give me an edge to put my markings on. Right, and then just give it a trim. And you can see just how wide and narrow that is. You just follow it along and you've got a big gap. So now we're pretty much squared up. Life is good. I do leave the salvage on this, so no problems in doing that. And once you have that done and trimmed, you just take it over and add it to your back. Now, once I've done that trimming and I've got it squared up, I just keep adding those pieces to my back until I get to the size I want to do. Now, for this particular back behind me, I ended up doing it in 3 sections. So my first section was this one over here. And then I did my middle section, and now I'm finishing up today this final section right here. Now, with doing that, what I did do is I went through and made sure I squared each section. So I'm squaring each piece as I put it together, and then when I'm done, I square each section just to be sure I don't have any wonkiness in my back. You really have to be very careful when you're working on backs. You do not want to have any excessive fullness in your back, any wonkiness, because that will affect the quality of quilting that your long armor is able to do for you. So those are some tips on how to make your own back. When you're done, you want your back, especially if you're taking it to a long armor. So in this case, my quilt is 80 by 80. I want my back to be 90 by 90. It needs to be about 10 inches bigger, top and bottom, or top and side, or 10 inches bigger all the way around. So, 5 inches bigger on the left, 5 on the right, 5 on the top, 5 on the bottom. So if your quilt's, 80 by 80, your back needs to be 90 by 90. If your quilt's 72 by 82, it needs to be 82 by 92. Get what I'm saying? All right, hopefully that makes sense. So these are just some tips that I use on making my own backs. This is a great way to use your extra pieces. It's also a great way to save money. In this current environment that we live in, it's always a good way to find, a good path to find a way to save some extra money. When you have a lot of extra material, especially if it's something that you love for the quilt you're doing, but you just don't think you're gonna use again in the future, put it in your backing. That's a great way to do it. All right, have a great day and happy quilting.